Hey, lovelies. I'm back in the hospital. I mean, not in the hospital, but working in the hospital. My badge. Carrying the house phone, available as needed for spiritual crises, and feeling a lot better day by day, gaining ground with this COVID that so many of us are grappling with. This incredibly, you got to hand it to this virus. It's super smart, as long as it still has, human hosts to propagate within, it will continue to mutate. It's a smart little bug, that virus. Smart little weird alien piece of random bits of protein. Yeah, viruses. Anyway, so here I am, and I wanted to do my reading for the day, and I want to say a few more words about this revolving of the cards method that I mentioned in my last video. Revolving the cards, I call it revolving because we just take a card that we haven't fully understood in a reading, and we use that card, we revolve that card into our next reading as the significator upon which we base our next reading. So we keep, plowing under the stuff that we need to keep sprouting, that we need to keep understanding. We want to keep revolving this crop of tarot meaning. And it's a particularly strong method for gently pushing into areas that we don't really understand. Yesterday, the card that I drew as my roots card was the Seven of Swords. And now this is a card in the Wild Unknown Tarot that I feel like I really have come to know very well over the years. It's a card that has come to me to mean a kind of keeping of my own counsel. The sort of deceitfulness, strategic kind of, not playing all of your cards, as it were, that this figure can depict, that sort of stealing away in the dead of the night, not showing your hand. But this depiction has suggested to me, in its appearance yesterday, has suggested to me that I don't fully understand the meaning of this card. So when we're revolving the cards, we're not just trying to touch deeper into an issue that we need to understand. We're also getting deeper on the meaning of the card itself. And that's what I love so much about the tarot, that our refinement of the message that's coming through the cards, so our refinement of our understanding of whatever the cards are pointing to in our own lives or in the life of our seeker, our sitter, the person who we're reading for, our sitter, that clarification of the issue at hand or at heart for the person for whom we're reading is also a clarification at the very same time of the meaning of the card itself. And over time, over reading after reading, particularly when we start practicing on a regular basis, this revolving of the cards practice, over time, what deepens for us is our understanding of the individual cards as we layer on connotation and understanding and context and implication after implication. We get a very rich and subtle patina, as it were, of meaning for each of the 78 cards. So this revolving of the card method, which has a very particular usefulness when we're trying to touch more deeply into an issue that we don't quite understand, it's also a kind of foundational way to work with expanding and deepening our understanding of the cards themselves. I hope that makes sense. So, I have felt very satisfied about my understanding of the Seven of Swords. I've understood it in the past to be about not wearing my heart on my sleeve and being willing to as I said before, keep my own counsel, to be strategic and to not reveal everything. Particularly in professional contexts, it's a card that has often come up in the context of grappling with authority figures, like my boss, for instance, or someone who I'm trying to convince to do a project, who has the ability to say yes or no, and if they say no, then I can't do the project either. So that kind of structural power, where I'm more disempowered, this card has often come forward to say, hey, you can keep stuff in reserve. And I've also always associated it with, or have come to associate it with, a kind of, the figure I always think of here is Jane Austen, and like Emma Thompson in the film version of Sense and Sensibility, Emma Thompson playing the figure for sense. It's like, you don't need to say everything all at once. You don't need to show your hand. There is such a thing as restraint, as being reserved, holding in reserve. Now, I'm a blurter. I'm someone who blurts things out, who just, duh! And this thing that happened yesterday, it was hours after I pulled this card, and it wasn't what I originally associated this card with. It was actually a very different interpersonal context. Received an email that was an announcement, and I had a reaction. I was going to zip off an email to an acquaintance, and I didn't. I just thought about it. I was like, don't do that. Now, this is a very mundane example, but for me, I often type before I think. And so that's a very simple, very homely little example of the kind of restraint and reserve that this card has often meant for me. But I sense that there's something else going on in this card. The artists behind this deck talk about the ways in which this card, this figure, might be stealing away and avoiding something. And so I want to see if there's an avoidance that's at stake here. And I'm actually going to use both cards from yesterday's Roots and Canopy spread. This is my Tower month, so I've been thinking about the Tower, and in this deck, one of the cards denoting the Tower is called Hubris. I actually got it Hubris reversed yesterday, which is fabulous because it looks like the figure is flying into the heavens rather than falling from the heavens. This was the card I pulled. It wasn't just because it's my Tower month. So extraordinarily, I got the Seven of Swords and Hubris. I love this card. This is just beautiful. So I'm going to put both of these cards back in the deck. And I'm going to shuffle really well. And then I'm going to pull, and I'm going to pull the card that's just after, or as it were, beneath the Seven of Swords, when I come across the Seven of Swords. And I'm going to pull the card that's just before Hubris, i.e. what's on top of Hubris, when I come upon Hubris. And that's going to be my new Canopy spread, Roots and Canopy spread. I want to just also clarify here that as I'm shuffling, and I'm going to cut some of this or edit this so that you don't have to watch me sort of set my intention in silence for a while, but as I shuffle, I am holding this intention in my mind. I'm picturing these cards, and I'm setting my intention to clarify, to push a little bit more deeply into what is being pointed to. I'm particularly going to be thinking about or setting my intention around this idea of what does the Seven of Swords, what does it mean for me? What am I missing here? What do I need to understand with the Seven of Swords as my root card as a card that is about perhaps stealing away from something I need to face, or not just keeping emotions or feelings in reserve or keeping my own counsel, but maybe I'm hiding from myself in some way. I'm wanting the Seven of Swords, its meaning, to get clarified. And particularly, I'm wanting to press a little bit more deeply into perhaps what I haven't maybe been willing to see. What I haven't maybe been willing to see about the Seven of Swords, and by extension, perhaps what I haven't been willing to see about me. What do I need to turn toward if that figure in the Seven of Swords is pulling away? I just dropped a card. For what it's worth, I dropped the Six of Cups. That's a beautiful card. I'm going to put it back in. Oh, and I have a couple that have popped up on top, which I'm also going to put back. The Star and reversed. The Seven of Wands. I'm going to tuck those back in. Cards that are about faith and nostalgia, the past, the ideal, the things we knew as children. Problem with this deck is it's got so many cards that I keep. Empress, Ten of Coins. I keep knocking them loose. So I'm not taking these jumpers too seriously, but I'm noting them. The deck is slightly too big for my hands. Okay, one last overhand shuffle. And I'm just turning over the cards one at a time until I come across the Seven of Swords and Hubris. Okay, Seven of Swords. The card immediately below. Oh, so that jumper might have been important. The Star. You know, like Temperance in this deck, who I just passed a little while ago. Where is she? Or like Temperance, you know, not just in this deck, but in the Waite Smith imagery. You know, these images of flowing water. But my God, in this deck, unlike the Waite Smith image of the star, which carries forth from Marseille, traditional Marseille imagery, she doesn't just have her foot touching the source, she's knee deep in it, right? So Temperance, which is a card I drew a few days ago, is meeting out the water, is balancing it out, is finding balance. But the Star, she's just immersed in the source. Okay, let's keep turning over until we get Hubris. This deck is just, by the way, glorious. This is the Terra Volatile, and I'm working with it all month long. And I'm not using the suit of vessels in it, but I am including all the other alternative cards. That's why the deck is so chunka. Okay, I've gotten Hubris, which is upside down because I put him in upside down. And the card right before him was the Six of Coins. Wow. In place of the usual figures we have, is that an ass? Is there a kind of Midas implication? A kind of reference back to the Four of Coins? I don't know. I'm going to have to look at the guidebook to understand that. And clearly, I'm going to be revolving the card for this tomorrow, because this is a card. I've had a long history of issues with the Six of Pentacles or the Six of Coins. But I do feel like the star, the clarity of the water and the light of the stars and the way in which her eye is in a straight line glancing up. You know, the star as being about faith and guidance and hope and this opening into a future horizon. And just in this depiction of it being plunged into the water, it just makes me think that part of what the Seven of Swords, you know, this sort of stealthiness of the Seven of Swords, the sneakiness of it, the restraint and reserve of it, it's like, is there an avoidance here of the source, of deity, of God, of divinity, of the sacred, unwillingness, a kind of stinginess of spirit that won't just lean in? Or is it saying, okay, some kinds of reserve might be about a holding steady, which I often think sevens, that there's a connotation in the number 7 in the tarot of this, you know, one step beyond a kind of holding steady and an ability to move into the future. And of course the star is itself a 7. It's 10 plus 7, 17. So is there a kind of invitation to see that holding steady in the source that needs to be at the base of all strategic action, of all reserve and restraint, so that we're not avoiding something, we're actually able to hold steadfast in something because of this underlying source of life, because of faith. And if I can root myself in the source, if I can plunge knee deep like the figure in this star, then a world of generosity, of true generosity, can open up. So I'm going to get the little white book. I have the physical copy at home, but I have the PDF stored in my Dropbox, so I have it on my phone. They're really wonderful on their website. The decks don't come with a printed copy of their guidebook, but you can, they have the PDF and you can download it. So, and then you can print it out yourself, or you know, upload it to a nice site like Lulu. And sorry, it's going to take me a minute to find the Six of Coins. Okay, coins. Ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, the Six of Coins is generally described as a card of generosity in which sharing with others has a great significance. On the right side, a noble cleric man dressed in red appears to be sharing his wealth with a crippled man unable to walk. Okay, so he's crippled. I mean, that makes sense. The beggar symbolizes not a person, but a situation in which we feel unable to stand up and walk, dressed in rags and unprepared to face the world. He receives help from an outside force. So their interpretation is putting a kind of cosmic weight on the idea of generosity, of trusting in the generosity of the universe. The donkey on the right side teaches us to be humble and hardworking so that we are worthy of our rewards. If you look carefully at the card, we are not sure who the real benefactor is. Is the nobleman giving the coin to the beggar, or is he collecting it from him? Some interpretations indicate that it may be someone taking something away from us, something that is not really in need. So generosity, abundance, the universe in its abundance. We have what we need, right? We have what we need. Okay, this has gone on far too long. I hope it was at least somewhat interesting to watch. Thank you, as always, for joining me. And as always, 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 thank you so much for your practice. Take care, everyone.